I'm Chris Robinson, a Senior Technical Architect with AOT Technologies, and I'm going to spend about 15 minutes telling you about an exciting open source project which AOT built and maintains called FormsFlow.ai. This product or framework is gaining a lot of attention worldwide for reasons which will become apparent during the presentation. Let's start off with the problem the product is trying to solve. In order to access a government or business service, an end user is required to fill in an online form. To do so, the user is required to identify themselves by logging into a web application. In most cases, a corporate, provincial, federal, or even social media identity provider is used to validate the user. In our case, the user has logged in using the British Columbia BC Services card. They fill in and submit an online form which saves the form data to an inbuilt backend database. This often triggers a backend workflow process. The workflow processes the form through a series of business-defined steps, often requiring manual approval or input from a staff member, also identified through a configured identity provider. In this case, perhaps the BC government either. In many cases, input or approvals may be required from multiple parties within or even beyond the organization, and very often the workflow engine will save or request data from a back-end system. Invariably, there's a need for staff to access the metrics of the process. For example, how many application forms are in the backlog, processing throughput, or average workloads. More often than not, there's a requirement to provide some kind of analysis on the data collected from the online form in a graphical manner, things like trends or sentiment analysis. And let's not forget the increasing demand for robotic process automation. Let's get a little more specific. At AOT, we have collectively worked on dozens of projects covering this broad use case, with specifics being such items as license and permit applications, citizen requests, for example, freedom of information, citizen and staff surveys, emergency processes such as COVID forms and workflows, HR and operations forms, and workflows and security and privacy processes, to name but a few. And through the process of implementing projects on many platforms, ranging from enterprise commercial off-the-shelf products or solutions to fully custom development, we've encountered similar pain points over and over again. Reinventing the wheel, so implementing basic forms workflow functionality from scratch time and time again. Expensive costs. Often a sledgehammer is used to crack a nut. We need to deal with enterprise issues of obsolescence upgrades, for example, Oracle Forms. Siloed analytics. Data sources are disconnected from processing workflows, requiring extensive customizations to get meaningful metrics, and this is often unforeseen and unplanned in the initial project planning. And of course, we need specialized skills to implement. We need skilled developers with experience in the platform to design, build, and maintain the system. And we need the specialized skills to continue to maintain the system. So inevitably, change is required, bringing in specialized skills again. And I'd like to emphasize this point because this is one of the real pain points that I've come across in all of the implementations that I've done, is the maintenance, ongoing maintenance of the system. Let's have a look at this in a little more detail. So we need to facilitate better ways to maintain systems which digitally gather and process information, particularly when faced with rapidly changing circumstances such as COVID. But more generally, legislation and public expectations are changing at a far more rapid rate than in the past. And importantly, we need to recognize that staff come and go, as do developers, as do our customers. We need a system which can be rapidly tailored to cater for changing requirements and personnel, and without a great deal of expense, and preferably by the people who know best, that is, the line of business users themselves. So with all of this in mind, AOT decided to build a low-code, no-code framework, which was called FormsFlow.ai, with one of the primary goals that of allowing business users to maintain the system with little or no pro involvement. So we set out to build a system where business users can build and maintain forms, where business users can build and maintain business workflows. As the workflows change, it should be possible for the people who know the business the best to make the changes to the workflow. Business users should be able to create dashboards. They should be able to see the data that they need to see without getting developers involved. What we have found is that fast initial implementation or initial implementations are much faster than the traditional approaches, especially if you get the pros in. So we would strongly recommend getting the pros in to get the initial implementation done. One of the other things that we are really passionate about is creating a library of features. So as more and more users use the platform, the open source platform, and contribute it back to the platform, we'd get an out-the-box library of features. You know, things like email, taskless components for Vue.js are a couple which spring to mind. We also wanted to save licensing dollars. So a big point of the system is that it's open source. You don't have to use enterprise versions of the components. However, we also want you to be able to use the enterprise versions of the components where you need them. We also wanted it to be really easy to install and to try out. We believe that the best way to see whether it's a good fit is to actually install it and try it out. And we believe you can get the whole thing up and running in an afternoon. So let's take a look at how we did this. This is your typical layered cake architecture diagram. What we did is we combined best of breed open source products to form a cohesive whole to address the general use case. Let's take a look at the layers. First, we chose a forms engine which needed to provide the following features: easy form construction through drag and drop, extensive validations and extension capabilities, the ability to create and manage complex forms as well as simple forms with a minimum of coding. The product that we selected here was form.io. Second, we wanted to integrate with a fully featured workflow product with the following features: a visual workflow designer, visual workflow dashboards, event and API-driven workflows, comprehensive user management with users and groups, automated and manual tasks, and a built-in rules engine. The product we selected for the workflow engine was Camunda. We also wanted to make use of a leading analytics engine to be able to provide configurable dashboards, provide insights into form and associated data from diverse data sources without requiring detailed knowledge of query languages or developer input. The product we selected here was Redash. A major goal of the solution was to centralize user management and to allow existing user management systems to be used. The whole purpose of an integrated identity and security management system is that you don't have to create different users for each of the different components. To this end, we integrated a world-class identity management solution with support for single sign-on, modern security standards such as SAML, OAuth 2, and OIDC, with the ability to use existing identity providers such as BCID, BC Services Card, IDA, GitHub, Google, a whole bunch of them. And the product we selected here was Keycloak. To tie the products together into a cohesive application, with appropriate decoupling and security layer, we developed our own progressive web application and API, which provides a single entry and navigation point for all types of users. In addition to providing crucial whole solution functionality, allowing integration between the various components, for example, the ability to view submitted application forms or to select a workflow task as part of the application, or the ability to display metrics and analytics dashboards. For this, we use a combination of Python, React, and a Postgres database. And for automatically deploying, scaling, monitoring, and managing the solution, we used a leading containerization platform which allows the product to be deployed into private or public, hosted or cloud environments. Here we selected OpenShift. The final piece of our solution stack is that of legacy or enterprise integrations. This is, of course, very site-specific and very specific on particular implementations. There is a requirement, though, to integrate with line of business systems or corporate databases, pretty much whatever the workflow solution you're implementing. So this is always something custom. For these integrations, We can sometimes use existing contributions either on GitHub or to various forums. AOT can be helpful with this. So that pretty much concludes the discussion of the architecture and the reasons for the existence of Forms Flow. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. Now I'm going to run you through some of the capabilities of the FormsFlow.ai system, giving a bit of a taste of how it feels for different kinds of users, and specifically how it can be considered to be a low-code framework. So let's start off by logging into the web application as a user, Nancy Smith. Now, Nancy Smith is a reviewer, so that means that she's a staff member. She processes application forms. She works as a team responsible for maintaining a bunch of applications and forms. So when Nancy logs in, you will notice that there's four main menu items. There are forms, applications, tasks, and dashboards. And on the forms tab, you'll see that Nancy has the ability to access these two forms, freedom of information and privacy, and a new business license application. So these are forms which members of the public can submit. Nancy also has the ability to submit these, sometimes on behalf of a member of the public, but essentially Nancy has the same capabilities as a member of the public to submit these forms. In terms of the applications, these are application forms which have been submitted through into the system, and we can see that there's a number of different application forms, and we can see that there are a whole lot of things that we can do with this. We can filter by various application names. We can view the form submissions. So for example, if we have a look here, we can see that this is a new business license application, and there's a bunch of fields here which the user has filled in and so forth. So that's what Nancy can see with all the applications. The tasks pane is a pane which Nancy typically will spend most of her day in, because she will be selecting tasks. Tasks will be routed through to her in the workflow, and Nancy will be able to click on one of those links and be able to see a particular application form which has arrived. The first thing Nancy will do is Nancy will claim the form to make sure that nobody else can access that form, and she's the one responsible for processing it. Again, there's a whole lot of functionality here. You know, one can have a look at things like the history, so you can have a look at what's happened during the life cycle of this form. One can also have a look at exactly where it is in the workflow processing. So all of these things, part of the integration that AOT has done between the forms engine, between the workflow engine, which is Camunda, and surfaced through our application which we built. The other thing that Nancy can do is she can have a look at the dashboard. She can have a look at metrics, so she can see how many submissions have been made. So for example, we see that there are 42 submissions of freedom of information form, and there are 37 submissions of the new business license. And for each of these, there are different interesting or important metrics which can be displayed, such as, for example, we can see how many of them have been approved or rejected for freedom of information, and for new business we can see similar kinds of things. Where things get really interesting is when we get insights. So insights are insights into the actual data of the form which has been submitted. So it's looking at the contents of the form. So for example, for this freedom of information form, we can see that 25% of the users who submitted this form want to examine the original form, whereas 75% of them are happy to get a copy. Now, this is a field which is contained in the form itself, and we're able to interpret that. We're able to get some insights into that. So that's a really quick overview as to, you know, what Nancy, who is a reviewer, can do. Let's now log in as somebody who is a different kind of user. So we'll log out and we'll log in as someone who's got the privileges of a designer. In this case, it's Peter Watts. Let's just get Peter there. So Peter Watts is a designer of the system. Peter Watts has a different experience when he logs in, and we'll see that. What I'll try and do here is I'll try and give you an idea as to what Peter Watts can do in terms of a low-code environment. So Peter Watts is a designer. He's somebody who can actually make changes to forms, and he can make changes to workflows. Peter has got 3 forms available to him. So there are 3 forms which are within his security abilities to access. So Peter has been given a task, let's say, of adding an additional field to the new business license application form. We want to have a new kind of business, which might be a not-for-profit business. So Peter will be able to go into this application and effectively make changes to an existing form or create a completely new form. So Peter wants to edit this form. So you'll click on the Edit Form button there. And if we scroll down, we'll see that there is a field there which is telling us what is the kind of business. So there we go, this type of business. So at the moment, we've got a sole proprietor partnership corporation and not-for-profit. So let's say that Peter, in fact, in this case, wants to get rid of the not-for-profit. We've decided that we don't want the not-for-profit. I must have actually edited this form in a previous demo. So and I added the not-for-profit. Let's say that we want to get rid of the not-for-profit. There's been a change in business requirements. So what Peter can do is Peter will click on the edit field there. We can see that we have a bunch of different tabs that we can set up. All of this in a no-code environment, right? We can define APIs. We can define. There's conditional logic. There's validations. All of these kind of things. And I don't really have time to go through all of this now. But what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to change its status. So we want to get rid of this. We want to get rid of this field. We don't want a not-for-profit field. And it's as simple as that. I've just gotten rid of that not-for-profit field. What I can do is I can then save my change, and you'll see that has been removed from the form. I mean, it really is as simple as that. Most changes to forms are as simple as that, and I can save the form. And Peter has then done his job. The form has been changed. There are, of course, versioning subtleties and stuff around that. Won't go into that right now, but essentially, in an almost trivial manner, Peter has been able to make a new version of this particular form. What I'd like to look at now is how might Peter actually modify something in a workflow type. How might he change a workflow? At the moment, Peter has, so we are in the form.io designer. Now remember that the solution is composed of a number of best of breed products. So we have form.io, we have Redash, we have Camunda, and each of these does have its own administration console. We arrive at the form.io administration console kind of invisibly from the web application. However, to arrive at the Camunda workflow console, what we need to do is we need to log into the Camunda administration console directly. However, because we're using Keycloak as a unified identity management provider, all of the logins are all seamless and they're all single sign-on. So I should be able to go into the Camunda console, which I have open on another tab. And if I refresh that, I should just be able to log in directly without having to enter my credentials, simply because Peter has already logged into the Forms Flow AI application. So we've given Peter the task of adding an extra step to a workflow. So the first thing that Peter and the workflow, which is affected by the forms, by the new business application form, we know that the workflow that the new business application form goes through is in fact the two-step approval. So if we click on the two-step approval, we get into something of an administration console where we can do a bunch of things related to this workflow. We can see immediately that there is an existing workflow diagram which does a bunch of things. If I want to edit that, I can click on this deployment ID, which is in essence the actual instance of the definition for this particular workflow. So we can see that there is a workflow called two-step approval.bpmn. BPMN is a standard, it's an XML standard which is related to workflows. So you could import this file into any one of a number of different workflows. And what I can do is I can download this workflow by clicking on the download button, and I get this two-step approval BPMN. You'll see in the bottom left-hand corner there. And then what I can do with this particular file is I can edit this in an application which is running locally, which is the Camunda graphical workflow designer. So let's open that application up. And if I open it up here, you'll see that it's called the Camunda modeler. And I've been doing some work with this before, but let's open this up. So what we're wanting to do is we want to open a file, which is the two-step approval. And if I open that file up, you can see that this is the exported file that I've created. So it's a copy of the one that I was running in the Camunda console. And I can now go and I can make changes to this file, or Peter can go and make changes to this file. So let's say that what Peter wants to do is he wants to create another step in the workflow. Let's say he wants to add some kind of notifications. So what Peter might do is maybe notify users, and he wants to bind that into the existing workflow. So what we might do is you might get rid of that link, and what we might do then is we might route that link over to notify users, and then from notify users we might go back to our end workflow process. So as easy as that, we've added another step into our workflow, or Peter has added another step into our workflow, which will notify the users when the application status has been updated. I mean, this is a relatively trivial example, but it just gives you some idea as to the power. Now, we've made the changes to the file in our graphical workflow designer. How do we actually get those changes into the system? Well, what we need to do then is we need to deploy the diagram, which we've just created, to our running system. And if I click on the deploy button, it's going to prompt me for a deployment name. So I'm going to create a new workflow, and I'm going to call it two-step approval with notification, perhaps. And I could then click on this deploy button, which will deploy it to the endpoint, which I have defined as my deployment endpoint for the Camunda workflow. At the moment, this is set to be my local host, so it's not going to go anywhere. So I'm not going to deploy it anyway. But all that I wanted to show is the ability to actually make changes, meaningful changes to workflows using little or no code. So this is why we consider it to be a low or no code framework. It is the ability for people with the appropriate privileges to make very quick changes to the system, both in the forms and in the workflows and in the dashboards, which I haven't really got time to go through now, without getting coders involved. Clearly, when things get more complex and there's integration requirements, people with coding skills will need to get involved, but it might be as simple as a couple of JavaScript snippets. It makes the maintenance and the ongoing life cycle of the whole system far more maintainable by the people who know the best, which is the business users. So that's all that I've got time to show you. Thank you again for listening.
Thank you, Chris, for that great insight into how the solution has been built from someone who's worked very closely with the solution. But now we're about to see how the solution has been implemented in the real world. So with that, I'd like to introduce Karim Gillani to the stage. Karim is the Digital Services Architect at the BC Provincial Government. So Karim, take it away.
Thank you, Spencer and Chris. That was a lot there. So hopefully I can keep up with what you demoed. So I work for Service BC, which is under Citizen Services, and which is in the Ministry of Citizen Services for the province of British Columbia. And we used FormsFlow AI for some really more complex integrations, some complex workflows, and integrating to our internal system, some automation, some complex logic, some extra timing events. We integrated into our applications like our appointments online for customer feedback and incident processes. We had to spin up some COVID returning traveler workflows. But what I noticed is there was a side effect to using FormsFlow AI, and that was that we could also reuse a lot of the templates and build workflows quicker and simpler. And those simple workflows actually had a major impact on how we deliver services today. And so that's what I'm actually going to demo today, is the simpler workflows. So why did we need this? Well, we have a lot of other ministries that use Service BC as a ministry partner. We have 65 Service BC offices where we have in-person access to citizens, as well as we have a contact center. And so we're used to working with the citizens. And there was a lot of COVID-related services that we were doing in the past. And so they would come up to us and ask us for some help with some ad hoc quickly, quick short-term COVID-related services. And what we noticed is that we could spin up a workflow using FormsFlow AI relatively quickly within a matter of days, and have it running to help manage these requests. And again, these requests were between 500 to 5,000 requests from citizens from like having issues with their online, trying to get their first shot, second shot, etc., or some system problems where we needed to just help out and contact the citizens. We could have done this manually, and we could have printed out all of the citizens we had to contact into a spreadsheet and shared the spreadsheet, or manually printed them out and updated them as we called people and had a manual checklist. But when you have 300 to 400 staff working on this at one time, that becomes a lot time consuming. There's chances for errors. We just needed a better way. So we found one. And so I'm just going to go straight into the demo and talk about the demo, because the demo is worth 1,000 words. So the first thing I want to talk about is how do we get the data in? Like I said, we have lots of ministry partners. Some of them are advanced, some of them weren't. And in this case, we could input the data through an API from some of our ministry partners that were really advanced and just had the data and ready to send it to us. The beauty about using FormsFlow AI, it is very API centric. I mean, Camunda is, FormsFlow, Form.io is. So the system is easy to integrate from other people. We just give them a spec that's from Camunda's website and the data that they want to send, and we can have them send it through APIs. Or if they have a CSV, a list of data that they wanted us to put in as forms, we could do it through like something like Newman or Postman and iterate through the API through a CSV file. We've done that before. And of course, the manual way, if we wanted one-offs, which also happens sometimes, where we can actually manually enter it in a form. So you'll notice this is actually a Form.io form, a really simple one. We rarely use it, but if we did, we could enter the stuff here. So my name, last name, I was really new, and I'll just PHN, I'll just put in some test data here, and actually test phone number, and test address, city, postal code. Okay, and I'm not going to fill in the extra information. They're there for when we needed to give additional information while we're doing our workflow. So there was 3 ways that we could enter the information, and then magically, I could go in through the tasks as well, but I also have it on a tab. And you can see this was created a few seconds ago, so this is live. And what would happen was we would have a staff member claim, and then because you had so many, they could just pick the ones that weren't claimed. So it was nice and easy for the staff to use it. If we knew that Karim was sick today, I could unclaim his and take it over, which is really advantage. It's not stuck in his desk. It's not stuck in his email. We know exactly where they are in the process. So really the advantage of using tasks, especially today in the COVID world where people are sick, calling sick, or need to manage their workflows, this was really important to us. You can notice that the data I inputted is on the left-hand side. We built this extra module, and so it's really handy for us to pull that data instead of having it. Of course, we could also see it on the history, but for our speed of calls, we wanted it right here. We were smart enough to pull some of the data, like the person's name and their phone number. There's some special workflow where if the person didn't call, it would kick it in a timer, and it'll try again in 3 hours, and it would just disappear. Of course, I'm in test, so it's coming back right away, but it would disappear for 3 hours. In this case, it comes back. And the great thing about this workflow is it actually gives you that information. So if there was any feedback that you wanted to read, it's all there. There's also the diagram, again, the BPMN, and I know that people said this was really important. It is critical. We built all our workflows, even the advanced ones, using the business at first and walking them through the BPMN or the workflow with them. And it was amazing how many times we would have to go back to the business and say, you're missing this part of the workflow. Oh, we never thought about that. Let's figure that out now. So not only was it advantageous to know where you are in the process or the workflow, and if someone left and someone else had to come back, you knew the workflow because it was right there and had all the rules in it. But it was yeah, so it also just provided a depth of knowledge from the business side. It was pretty amazing. So here I am. I'm going to call the citizen. I called them once. They didn't answer. They didn't answer. Today they did, and you'll notice that it actually cans in the name for me, and I can actually have some info bubbles with some tips. And of course, we'll need to change that in the future. Have some, just confirm I'm talking to the right person. I have certain requirements. I'll hit yes, and that's required. Extra not out of the box, but extra components that I stole from one of the other workflows was the email. So this way the staff didn't have to email from their address and get replies from the citizens. They could just do it directly from here. They could update it, which was pretty impressive. So there's a lot of business intelligence within the workflow itself as well. And then, of course, you have your options to close and complete. And of course, all of this stuff is sent to our internal analytics. We didn't use FormsFlow AI analytics yet, but we may in the future. So that's kind of the simplest form, but amazing, just amazing how well it worked. We have lots of different forms. Of course, we spun up another one for another ministry where it did some amazing calculations and things like that. And so what I'm going to do now is show you how easy it was to edit it. And again, I could just go back to the forms here and edit it, but I'll just go straight to this tab. And so this is the form that we were just using. And in the form, you could see, actually, let me go back and I will show you one of the bugs that I noticed, and it's going to drive me nuts. So when I click this, you'll notice that way down here, the buttons are way down here instead of up here. So let's go ahead and fix that, because that was just something that drove me nuts. And I'm not a programmer in any shape or form. I understand digital world and I understand the concept of things, but I'm not a programmer. All I know is I can just drag this whole thing up so that now that it's sitting in here instead. And at the same time, you know what? I am not the COVID-19 music booking area. I'm actually Service BC. So I want to change this to actually say Service BC, and I'll say, so I've made those two changes. I'm going to save the form, and you saw this in Chris's demo, but this is actually what we're going to ask our business to do so that our programmers don't have to do it themselves. And that's the power, right? Is that they can actually manage that. So you'll notice that the real-time nature, it now says this. As well, when I hit submit, this is actually not scrolling all the way down, it's up at the top. So really easy fixes that, could have been an RFC and quotes and all of the time it takes a developer to understand and test and work through it. All of that's saved when the business does it themselves. And oh, by the way, if they made a mistake or had a problem, they added the FormsFlow AI guys added a way to download and upload forms, so you could always just recover from that as well. So you could see how easy it was to edit the form, fix the bugs and whatnot. And honestly, we started using this for additional forms. And I noticed that someone asked, like, what was the power of this? Well, you're right. You can have a business process with multiple forms in different areas, and it can escalate to various people. It is extremely powerful with the BPMN piece to it. Of course, this one's a relatively simple one with the timer, but you always know where you are in the form as well. So it's pretty impressive that way. So I hope that helps you get an idea of how we're using it, giving our folks some idea, or giving our business some power on the FormsFlow AI to do the updates themselves, so that they don't have to come to a developer to make those changes in a rapid way, especially with COVID and all of the changes that are happening, giving them a way to manage the resilience and the shifting priorities or the rules, and all they have to do is update a tip or a link. They can do it themselves, and they can do it quickly. That gives a lot of the power back to the staff, that empowers them and gives them a feeling of helping out and working. And especially today, in the days where we need to move fast and give the users that power. Of course, I noticed that it's not, I mean, it's low code for a reason, right? We're talking about the business technologists. And so as Gartner put it, there are a lot of these people. These are the people that spin up the Microsoft Access. These are the people that do amazing macros or some automation on their desktop with the Microsoft products out there. And it's amazing how many there are, actually. And I think Gartner noted there was up to like 45% of your workforce is that way. And my daughter just the other day was coding in grade 8 or 7. So it's not like these are going away. They're actually they're just increasing, and you need to give them that power. You need to give them the ability to make changes as we reduce our staff workflow and we are busier with more advanced technology features. It becomes really important. The other thing that I noticed that is, it's really hard to prove the worth of something. So for example, in this particular system, we actually we went from 10 minutes per call to 1 minute. The amazing shift in speed and the ability to call more staff or more citizens at one time was critical. And to prove it to the business now can say, you know what, now we could automate this part or lean this part of the process. And using the newer tools in Camunda, Optimize, and the more enterprisey ones, you can actually look at that and say, now that you see the power of this workflow, let's make it even better by automating this and saving extra time. So we can see that the coordination between the IT and the business become actually closer. And we become this digital environment where the IT isn't the separate place and scary place for the business to talk to and interact. In fact, it's actually bringing them closer together. So I thought that was really an important point. And in fact, even in our workflows today, we're seeing that a lot, where our business is saying, hey, could you do this as well? Or can we add this? And it's just a better environment to work in. So as I said, it's pretty impressive on where we're heading with the low code, no code situation. So what's next for me? Working with the Forms Flow team, you know, we're going through this journey together, and we're giving them suggestions, and it's great to be open source, because if we wanted to add some code, we can, and we have. And if we wanted them to add some code, we could suggest it, and their teams have been very responsive in adding that functionality for us. Also really important for a government is to make sure the product is secure and maintains the latest updates. So keeping it maintained and update as a platform for our staff, so they don't have to worry about it, is really important for us. So working with Forms Flow AI to make sure that happens and is working. And then of course the part that we have our own analytics team, so we didn't really dive into the analytics part of their product. But we do know that analytics is really critical, and giving the business that power, and I know they're looking for it, and adding that feature to our own is going to be pretty critical there as well. So I'm going to end with, what workflow would you create? I had a great time using this product. We spun up workflows, advanced ones in less than 2 or 3 months, and really simple ones like the one you saw today, and some other amazing calculation-based ones within a day, and saved our workload tenfold. Thank you.
Thank you, Karim, and also thank you, Chris, for highlighting the benefits of FormsFlow.ai as a workflow solution. So with this, we'd like to open the floor to our audience for any comments or questions you may have for Karim or Chris regarding the solution. All right, looks like we have a question here from Don. Put this on the screen. So does this track versions and have the ability to roll back to previous versions? Plus, can you publish to a QA environment for review before publishing, or are all changes immediately live?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit to that. Right at the moment, Don, we don't have that. That is definitely in the pipeline. I would note though that it is available in the enterprise version of Form.io. So as I said in my presentation, sometimes it's actually very worthwhile to go for the enterprise version and pay the enterprise licensing fee for that. But it's definitely something which is a very, very strong requirement. In terms of publishing to a QA environment, you can pretty much publish to any environment. That's kind of, I guess, dependent on your own internal workflow. So how does it go from one environment to the other? But I think the versioning of, I mean, Karim pointed out that there is the ability to load a form, to save a form, and then to reload it back if it doesn't work. That's kind of clunky versioning. Personally, I'm not super happy with that. I definitely like the ability to use a proper version control system. But as I say, you can do that now with the enterprise version of Form.io.
So the part that's not available immediately, unless of course you buy the enterprise version of Form.io, is the versioning piece. In terms of publishing to a QA environment, like I said, what I would do is save the form, which you saw the functions when I was demoing, and then you could upload it into your production. And yes, it would go live right away. The workflow piece, the Camunda piece, is versioned in its nature. And so you definitely need to work on planning that versioning for any net new forms.
One thing that I would point out, though, just it's more of a I guess a mindset shift is, we're so used to working in an environment where you go from development and then you go into test and then you go into like a staging environment and sometimes two staging environments, and then you finally put it out to production. I think that technology is moving now in a direction, certainly with some of the DevOps changes and some of the, the get releases out quickly, small releases quickly, changes that we're seeing, that I think that's becoming less and less of a hurdle. I mean, I still think that it's important to be versioning forms, but as Karim showed, like he could get a form out there live pretty much, with some small change in 10 minutes. But you could also pull that back in 10 minutes. So sometimes I think we need to maybe just concentrate on releasing quickly, releasing small releases, and just getting them out there. It's not really a comment on forms, but it's just a comment in general about how we get stuff out, how we make changes quickly to quickly changing environments.
Thank you for answering that, guys, and thank you, Don, for your question. Remember to add your comments and questions into the comments section, and I will put them on the screen if we have any. It looks like I have one here. I'll get this up. So is the benefit of low/no code most felt at the beginning of a project or when the project is mature and small changes are needed?
I'm sure that Karim can talk to this a bit more. What certainly in my experience, there's definitely a fairly significant advantage at the beginning of a project when just to deploy this as a solution. It honestly, using forms flow as opposed to using something much more heavyweight, I would say it's a factor of about 5 times quicker. It just is so much quicker. But to me, that's a really cool benefit, and that's really nice. To me, the real benefit of it is that the ongoing maintenance. I mean, let's face it, products aren't delivered and then just stay forever. More and more products have a complete life cycle where effectively you go with your MVP and then your MVP changes as you do your user testing and so on and so forth. Products live and change far more, and I think that we've come to appreciate that. And to me, the low-code, no-code environment is so powerful in that phase of the product life cycle because the business users can actually make the changes. They're the ones who know what needs to be done, right? So this big gap between business user writing some kind of a specification which goes to some kind of to a coder who doesn't really understand the business, etc. All of that's disappearing. The business guys get in there and they can make the changes directly. What do you think, Karim?
Yeah, this was such an interesting question, because I find that I had to prove out the tool right away, and then with just a small MVP. And so the low-code platform, FormsFlow AI, allowed me to do that. And then when the business saw the value, I got to spend some developer dollars to lean out the process. So one, I find it really beneficial in the beginning because it forces the BPM in. It forces the business process up front. So you're not gathering requirements and iterating through them and then building and realizing your requirements are wrong. You're doing that right up front. At the same time, now that it's built and working and running, it's so nice to just say, okay, business technologist, you know that your links change and your wording and your verbiage change, go for it and change it. It's a different person, but wow, what a benefit to maintain that. Like Chris said, it's amazing. So I see the benefits in both. Incredibly important. And then in the middle is the piece where you can evaluate it and say, let's make it better with RPA and other integrations, which I think we're going to talk about in the next question.
Awesome. Thank you for answering that. It looks like we have another question. We have time for a few more questions. So this one is coming from Richard. Richard asks, are there any plans to add more capabilities targeted at citizen developers, the other platforms to do like RPA and integration without needing developers as much as it does today?
Yeah, sure. So RPA is something fairly dear to our hearts at the moment. In fact, I think that in probably less than 10 minutes, Vinod will be demoing some FormsFlow stuff. He just announced something recently, so we actually do have some integrations, some RPA stuff coming, sort of hot off the press. Of course, Camunda does do a bunch of RPA stuff. They've got a whole suite of things doing that. So again, that if you had specific RPA requirements right now, you might actually go for an enterprise version of Camunda, and there's other reasons why you might want to do it. One of the ones that Karim mentioned is that it does give you the ability to optimize some of your workflows. So it's an enterprise feature where you can see where your bottlenecks are and stuff like that. So there's definite advantages to doing that. But we do want to have citizen developers, low cost availability to open source RPA frameworks for sure, and that is coming out in the next release.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Chris. And thank you, Richard, for your question. Another one here. So are there any special skills or training needed to set up dashboards with Redash?
So no special skills or training. I mean, you need to know the Redash framework. There's a way of doing things. But by and large, it's a case of understanding what your data is and understanding what the fields are and understanding how you want to report on them. So for any of those out there who've used any other kind of BI tools, it's very much the same kind of thing, possibly a bit easier. You certainly don't need to know. You don't need to be creating, multiple complex SQL joins and stuff like that. You can get a simple dashboard up and running really quickly. So you don't really need a lot. You can pretty much read about it online from the Redash site. as I have pointed out, we're using best of breed products. These guys are good at what they do. If you need stuff about how to use the individual components, there's tons of information out there. The other thing that I think is worth mentioning is that the components that we've chosen, they're all popular components, right? So one of the selection criteria was that the GitHub repo had to be really actively developed, and all of the components, all of the constituents that we use to build the forms flow framework are very actively developed tools. So yeah, go to the site and you'll find all you need to know.
Fantastic, thank you. It looks like we have time for about one more question. So, is it possible to use some pieces of the framework without using the whole stack? For example, just forms and security, or just workflow?
Sure. It's a question that I get asked quite a lot because sometimes people just want to get the forms capabilities, and they don't necessarily want the workflow, or they have the workflow using other systems. And we're finding this more and more because we've developed a very API-centric way to doing things. We're pretty agnostic, right? So we don't have any problem with people using form.io in the framework, which is integrated with Keycloak, or possibly not even Keycloak, with any other OIDC provider. So maybe Okta, or anything else. And then accessing another workflow engine, Activity, or even Oracle workflows, because we have this API-centric approach. That's all possible, and it's probably quicker than taking the constituents and building it yourself. So I think that the stack, even though you're not using all of the components, is still giving you a significant benefit, and that's not even talking about things like OpenShift. So we've built all the OpenShift pipelines and stuff like that. You can definitely leverage parts of the solution without using the full stack, and you can replace bits and pieces which you don't need. There's probably going to be use cases where you might as well just go straight for a particular component if you've got a very widely varying stack, but I'm pretty sure that you'll find benefit in using most of the stack.
Great, thank you for answering that. And it looks like we're about out of time for our questions. Thank you to our audience for participating with your questions for Karim and Chris.